SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Barcelona, the industry-leading conference bringing you the future of sports betting and iGaming.
SBC Summit Barcelona is the fastest growing sports betting and iGaming event in the industry, happening on the 19th to the 21st of September. Experience the entire global industry coverage under one roof, with 15,000 delegates, over 350 exhibitors, and so much more. Get your tickets now at sbcevents.com.
Experts cite that sports betting stands at the crossroad of its next evolution of products and services. However, opinion remains divided on how the future of sports betting will be shaped and which tech innovations will truly advance sports betting customer experience or bring true utility to operators. Bringing sportsbook affairs into the spotlight, next week's industry executives will gather at the SBC Summit Barcelona, shedding insights, opinions, and conflicts on sports betting's future status. Today, iGaming Daily previews the future of sports betting track at the Summit Barcelona. And I am joined by Ted Menmuir and Martyn Elliott. How are you both doing today? You okay?
Good. I've got a very wobbly chair, which is a death trap, and this might be my final podcast, guys. It's shaking all over the place. I've been told not to move.
Next Monday's episode will be in memoriam of Ted.
Thank you. Say nice things here.
We'll put an image of you at SBC Summit Barcelona in a nice black and white photo.
Definitely be things to say, Ted. Well, I mean, slightly different to Ted in that my chair is quiet and comfortable, which means I'm having quite a good day. Thanks, James.
I can't believe we're actually starting a podcast talking about chairs. I'm on a metal stool. This is such a weak start to a podcast about chairs. So let's get on to the actual topic of the podcast itself. And we're going to be looking more at SBC Summit Barcelona. And like we said, we're looking at the future of sports betting track, which, Ted, you picked this as one of your tracks to watch at Barcelona. And before we actually get into that, Martyn, do you want to tell us the track that you want to discuss on today's podcast? Or the panel, sorry?
Yes. What I want to look at is the panel that's called Sports Betting's Makeover, the Influence of Gamification, Streaming and Stats, which is really going to look at things that people have been talking about for quite a long time. And we're now, the panelists are going to really discuss how sportsbooks can integrate a lot of these things now that the technology is there to do so, in terms of, streaming live action, integrating stats from the games themselves into that, and then also a little bit of gamification, which is an interesting subject for sportsbooks, shall we say.
Perfect. And that's something we're going to, again, look at later on in the podcast. So a nice little teaser there from Martyn. But back to Ted, back to Edward. We're going to be looking at the future of sports betting track. And for you, can you just give us kind of an overview of this future of betting and why it is so important for this track to be at Barcelona?
Okay, so James, we're looking at the whole track and the whole theme of innovation that's going to be spoken about at Barcelona. And as you mentioned in the intro, it is, well, there are so many crossroads for the industry at the moment. So one of them is, yes, there's a regulatory crossroad coming in. Everyone's aware of that. But there's also, I think the tables are turning in terms of innovation, who's grabbing innovation, how it's going to change the industry. But it's also, I think when you speak to the executives and you speak to your CTOs, your CSOs, there is a division about which technology is actually going to make an impact and where they are investing in, and how these innovations will actually change the end products, but also change the value chain of the industry and how it does business. Also, where they see kind of the improved efficiencies coming from innovations. So there's a lot of big questions up in the air, and I think these are great themes to debate at a conference.
Mm-hmm. And again, as the title says, it's looking into the future, but Kind of let's look at the present. Let's look at the current status. What is sports betting's current status in present day?
Well, look, I mean, if you talk from a product view, it's still very mobile orientated. And then I think you got to, when talking about technology, it's understanding the value chain of sports betting and how they get the product out to customers. So yes, you're relying a lot of proprietary solutions, API feeds. Also, I think if you look around every sportsbook, they've all kind of got the same data structure. Now, I think what the real innovation is going to say is where within that value chain are components going to be disrupted, and how's that going to bring utility to the sportsbook, but change the customer relationship and the customer experience. I agree with a lot with why Martyn's highlighted his panel, because it is talking about gamification, convergence, and convergence with other products. Now, there are conflicts within this because in order for innovation to work, it's, as we all know, gaming and sports betting, they're kind of intertwined with what the regulatory outlook's going to be or what the regulatory conditions are going to be like. And that's definitely going to have effect on what the outcome from an innovation standpoint is going to be.
No, I think Ted has covered that fairly well from what the industry is looking at. As ever in these discussions, I tend to take the view of the punter a bit more than the operator. So I'm really interested to hear what these guys in Barcelona will be talking about in terms of how these innovations that they're keen to implement and so on will affect the user experience. Will it make betting a more enjoyable pastime for people? Or are some of these things a little bit too far? Are they too far removed from why people have a bet to start with? So it'd be really interesting to look and see if this is genuinely going to benefit the customers.
The industry kind of has its key buzzwords, and one of those buzzwords is innovation. It gets thrown about quite a lot, and it gets misused a lot within the industry to the point it becomes a bit numb when you see it. But Ted, I'll put this to you, and Martyn, you can add on as well. Can you just stress the importance of why we should be focusing on innovation and why it's the focus of a track at SBC Summit Barcelona?
Okay, I mean, from my point of view is, again, innovation's key, and it's key now because we have reached peak industry, peak sports betting growth. If you look at the PLCs, even securing 1 or 2% growth becomes harder and harder each quarter. And we've also got to kind of the late stage of this industry where, you know, yes, M&As can be effective, right? But you've also got to think about the next stage of your business, right? You can't just rely on one strategy. And I think in the past, you would be correct. We did kind of use innovation, and it did get thrown around, right? But I now actually think that companies are setting aside some real investment, some real budget to say what technology takes us there, what is needed from a resource, and also they're actually looking further afield to say, you know, what talent do we need in-house to build this stuff? I think a lot of it's been driven because of entry into the US. But I think another issue coming in, it's the LATAM markets, the developing markets, because I don't think that you can take a European technology stack and apply it to developing markets in South America. I just think that's going to be a really bad strategy. So I think that the industry is rewriting its playbook as we speak.
Yeah, so I guess the shorthand for what Ted's just said there is it's a little bit about money and profit. All these things, if you can do it better, will cut costs and help you take market share. So I guess that's the very basic way to look at it. But I also think in the internet age, where people are accustomed to being able to watch legally or illegally any sporting event they want, in essence, and you also have competition for screen time from, Netflix, from computer games or video games. Sorry, just dating myself there using very old terminology. In that battle for screen time, you need to be doing something that's more engaging for younger people. It's fine for a standard sportsbook operation. It's fine for me at 50 years old, because I just want to go on, have a bet. My enjoyment comes either by the anticipation of whether that bet's going to win, and then once in a blue moon, the fact that I do win. But I think for more internet savvy people, younger people than me, that isn't the case. That online experience has to be better, has to be richer than just the transaction.
I've got my video here on, and when you said younger people than me, Ted just put his finger up, and I was like, no, Ted.
No, can I just add? Because Martyn raises a very good point now, and I think within the playing field of gambling, I think the boundaries are blurring, and I think that there's actually been a lot of kind of thought leadership about this, about going forward. Gambling companies have to know who their friends and frenemies are, especially in innovation, right? Because we're talking about the makeup of your competitions changing, and one of the things is, what's going to happen if you get a powerhouse like ESPN, who can easily drop, $1 billion, $2 billion in innovation, can easily access the, go out, acquire, get the best talent in. And I think kind of the PLCs realize that and say, hey, we need something special in our armory. We need something that takes us through for the next decade. And it can't just be like acquiring smaller companies. It has to be something organic. It has to come from us. It has to be built in-house.
Just before we move on to Martyn's panel pick, Ted, the future of sports betting is a full track. Can you just list off a few of the interesting voices that will be heard that week?
So, James, yes. Martyn's going to be speaking on sports betting's makeover, but I think that's followed up by a really good panel, or by a really good presentation by Nick Cockrell, VP of Betting Products and Innovation at Stats Perform. And this guy knows his sportsbook through and through. So especially on data conflict, on trading, and on the use of live streams, I think there's no one better than him. Another important panel, and one that I think we got stellar lineup in there, is bringing kind of lottery engagement to sports betting. You got James Arnold from the pools, and another good friend of mine, Bernard Martinelli from Colossus Bets, really knows his maths, really knows, a guy who really has brought innovation before, especially in his role with Colossus Bets, but a guy that, when it comes to kind of price and markets, fixed odds models, I think he's second to none.
Cool. No, looking forward to that. Looking forward to hearing what everyone's got to say there at the event and post the event as well, because we can access stuff online. Martyn, let's jump on to your panel. Ted, you can discuss like Martyn has on this as well. Like you said, you're looking at the sports betting's makeover, the influence of gamification, streaming, and stats. Before we kind of just jump into some questions about it, can you just explain who's going to be speaking on that panel?
Of course. It's an interesting lineup, because we've got speakers from some sportsbooks who kind of pride themselves on doing things a little bit differently. So Andre Nesser, president of Coolbet, James Mackay, who's sportsbook director of LiveScore Group. LiveScore have done an awful lot of work on the sort of convergence between sports media and sports betting. So he'll have some interesting things to say, I'm sure. We've got Billy Levy from Rivalry over in Canada, I think. And then also Jason Trost, CEO of Smarkets.
Cool. And it's an interesting one at the moment because both gamification and streaming, streaming in particular, to be honest, the technology for live streaming, it's at the right spot at the moment. It's at the right place. It's as strong as it's ever going to be. And even if you look in different forms of streaming, it's the go-to medium at the moment. But with that, kind of one thing I want to ask you is kind of what's the kind of potential, or what sort of potential does that provide for operators to engage with players further? Now you've got a system which seems fluid and at the peak of its capabilities at the moment.
Well, that's an interesting question. And I think it's fair to say nobody has quite mastered this yet. If you've ever sat on how should I put this? A Saturday afternoon and watched some of the streamed games on, I won't name any operators, but on their websites, it's not that satisfactory an experience currently. So they need to be looking at ways to integrate this more effectively. And there's a number of things they can do. What I'd be interested to hear in Barcelona is whether any of them have got an idea of how this will work on their site more effectively than it does at the minute. I'm hoping that nobody is going to do it down the route of the kind of coverage that DraftKings has on UFC, which is really on the TV coverage itself, has the odds integrated, has the commentators talking about the odds all the time. Even as somebody who likes a bet, I find that really intrusive and frankly quite annoying, to the point where I feel like switching off quite often. But there's another alternative on this stuff, which the PGA Tour did in the US. They ran an experiment with PointsBet for a big tournament there called the Waste Management Open.
The Waste Management Open?
Yeah, I'm always amazed at. I mean, in the US, the golf tournaments always have sort of down at heel sponsors, whereas in the European Tour, it's all the Rolex Open and the Porsche Masters and things like that. So, yeah.
See, in the UK, I kind of align waste man with some like urban slang. It's like a disrespect to someone. You're a waste man.
That's it's a South Park episode waiting to happen there, isn't it? Waste man opening a golf tournament. So, yeah. So what they did, let's just call this the Phoenix Open for the make it less entertaining. They worked with PointsBet and with I think it's NBC's streaming platform Peacock, and they had what they called a second screen experience. So throughout the tournament, over the 4 days, you could watch the actual golf coverage itself on NBC, and then maybe on your iPad or whatever, have this second screen on, and former players and betting experts and so on discussing the odds, talking about the percentages, chances of people making the putts, and all that kind of thing going on there. So it's a great use of both the, I think, streaming technology and the data, which we're going to look at in a minute, to provide something that is richer, probably is informative for bettors as well, something they can really engage with. So that's an interesting model. It'd be interesting to see whether anyone else follows that.
Yeah, sports fans have got a tendency to be rather geeky and happy to, let's say, take a deep dive into matches and certainly with players' stats. Is integrating this type of data into a sports book an aid to betting, or do you think it's more of a distraction for punters?
Well, you've definitely described me there as a bit geeky and willing to drop down into the stats.
Definitely didn't tailor this question to you.
Yeah. I'll just give you one from the rugby at the weekend, because I've read the stats from England, Argentina in great depth. Lewis Ludlam came on as a replacement with 14 minutes to go, and he finished the game with 11 tackles, which is just awesome. It's my favourite start of the tournament so far, but I'm sure there'll be others. Yeah, I mean, I go back quite a long way with attempts to use data to inform my betting. Back to the time in the early 2000s when my flatmate was a computer programmer, and I was sports fanatic, and between us, we came up with a tennis betting system in which he took the data, manipulated it, came out with some tips, and we won quite a lot, but we won very little. And the reason was that all this system was telling us was that Pete Sampras would beat Britain's number 5 when they played. So that was hopeless. But I am quite optimistic that, I'm quite optimistic that given the breadth of stats available from the big data providers now, that there'll be a lot more useful things for punters coming in here. So the sort of things you might be looking at is data cards that display alongside odds, giving you the full sort of, rather than the full stat pack, which is a bit difficult to wade through, just gives you the odds related to the market you're viewing on the site, the data related to the market you're viewing on the site, in terms of, whether that's, NBA and NFL might be the next scorer, or might be next player to get a yellow card in the football, that kind of thing. I do wonder, though, a little bit whether punters trust that kind of thing if it's on a sports book itself. So the better place to put that, in my view, is where you've done your media partnerships with that, the big newspapers, or even with the leagues and clubs themselves. Is that where you promote that data? Is that where you help punters make the selection?
Yeah. Martyn raises a very, very interesting point. And look, sports books for the past decades now have been inundated with data. And I think there's been a revision about how do you kind of organize this data and create a better end product. But at the same time, I think kind of post-COVID, there's a kind of realization that you have to, as a sports book, be able to cater for everyone's interests, which in itself is an impossible task. So, my question to Martyn was, how do you think sports books take the data, take the analysis, and say, look, this is going to be our end product to engage with James or Martyn, and to make sure that they come and wager and that they come back?
Well, that's a good question, because the difficult bit of that is having a product that's suitable for everyone. Not everyone is as obsessive about sports as I am. And for people who've never had a bet before, presenting them with a load of data it's quite overwhelming. I really like things like the LiveScore, if we're not talking about LiveScore Bet now, but the LiveScore app itself, and there are various competitors to that. The fact they have the odds integrated throughout the game. When you check in on a Saturday afternoon, you can make your bet instantly through the links there and so on. I think that's very helpful. I'm less keen on it being on the site itself, I must say. But there are other things. How do you integrate that data with your brand ambassador for his tips column, for instance? And there's just one other thing I want to flag here. Sportsbet.io, they're now running their own sort of version of Soccer Saturday on game days in the Premier League and Champions League. So obviously they don't have the reporters at the games, but they do have people, reading out things like they're giving you the scores throughout the day. They're watching the games themselves in the studio, telling you what's going on, but also intertwining that with the change in the odds, the change in the markets, and so on. It's an engaging product, and they have some stats there that show people are betting. It's like 50% more the people who are tuned into this than who are just browsing around the sportsbook. So there are ways and means to do it. I think you just have to be imaginative. But I guess the simple answer to your question, Ted, is no one has quite got the perfect solution quite yet.
Cool. That's all we've actually got time for, because we ran over a little bit, and there was a few other questions that we would love to have touched on, but alas, time has beaten us. We can never beat time. Just for the listeners out there, I will leave some links in the description to SBC Summit Barcelona's event page, so you can see the agenda for yourself on who's speaking and a bit more detail on the future of sports betting track. Ted, Martyn, thank you for joining me today. And again, to listeners out there, thank you, and I will see you tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Barcelona, being held at the Fira Barcelona Montjuic on the 19th to the 21st of September. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network, or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.